Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today with us, we are very privileged to have the lovely Evgenia Macpherson, who is a VC investor, tech entrepreneur, and director at Freja. And she's a entrepreneur investor with a finance background. And she's really supporting women's health through her board role at Freja, a non-profit company raising awareness around reproductive health conditions as a fundraising director. And she's also the founder of La Visionnaire Conference and community, empowering women entrepreneurs and a fundraising consultant, also helping early stage founders navigate their fundraising journey. So a very, very busy, very busy life, it seems. But we're going to speak a bit today about fundraising and FemTech and all the different hurdles and different things that you guys do. And so, yeah, firstly, I just want to say welcome to the show.
Great. Thank you so much, Jess, for having me and for this introduction.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, just so people get to know a bit more about you and yourself, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background and your own personal story about how you got into these many different roles that you have.
Sure. Thank you. So having spent more than a decade in finance, tech, and VC, which are very male-dominated environments, I really feel strongly about helping women advance their causes in society and the workplace. I have started my career in banking, then co-founding and managed an AI-enabled tech startup that is still operational. And after completing my MBA at London Business School, I spent the last 5 years working in venture capital and promoting the ESG agenda in the VC space. Just as a side note, women's health as a sector is outside of the scope of the fund that I'm currently at, but I'm helping female founders as an advisor and fundraising consultant. And we know that women-founded startups account for only 2% of VC funding invested in Europe and the US. And I would like to help change that. You know, women can be incredible entrepreneurs and achieve superior performance, all while promoting inclusive leadership, positive social impact. But they often face many more obstacles on their way, such as access to finance, lack of confidence, absence of support network and community.
Mm.
And this is why I co-founded the Visionnaire Community and Conference to really help aspiring female entrepreneurs take the first step and help them with three main things: working on their mindset and confidence, providing them with practical business tools such as marketing, pitching, fundraising, and connecting them with a like-minded community of women. And the topic of women's health has always been close to my heart. And that's why I've joined the board of Freja as a nonprofit, which is a nonprofit company raising awareness around reproductive health conditions, as a fundraising director. And Freja was founded by an inspiring founder, Mike and Dish, to change the narrative around living with reproductive health conditions and to empower people by giving them opportunity to tell their stories and finally be heard, seen, and supported by their GPs, families, at work and in school. It was founded, Freya in Norse mythology is the goddess of fertility, battle, and death. And the main thing we work is by collecting stories from people living with conditions such as endometriosis, PCOS, fibroids, infertility from all over the UK. And often what we hear is that when people tell their story is that it's the first time they finally have their voices heard
Mm.
without any judgment or bias or just saying, it's just a bad period. So
Yeah.
it's quite a powerful tool.
Wow. Yeah. All of that stuff is amazing. I can't wait to delve into each different aspect of that. So maybe if we almost start from the beginning and start from the wider perspective, from your role as an investor, what do you see as some of the key trends in FemTech today? Where do you kind of see this market going?
Yeah, great question. First of all, just to maybe clarify, like many people in the space have a bit of an issue with the word femtech because you might know it was coined by Ida Tin, a talented founder who founded the fertility tracker Clue in 2016 and refers to technology being developed in service of women's health from periods to pregnancy to menopause. But the term femtech can be problematic because it tends to put women's health into a small box, mainly focusing on those not so fun topics like periods, vaginal dryness, contraception, menopause. So it may seem like women's health is a niche issue, whereas it affects, half of the world population directly, and
Mm.
then the rest of the world's population indirectly. So making it a niche issue is because which makes tech and VC leaders think of it as a niche and they can easily brush it off. So we really have to probably work around the narrative and highlighting that it is a major issue that deserves so much attention and shouldn't be sidelined and labeled as niche. But just, speaking about venture capital investment in the space, it's really been growing steadily in the last 10 years. It's accounted for about 1 billion annually a year of investment going into the space from VC investors, having reached its peak in 2021 with about 2 billion, but it still accounts for a tiny fraction of the overall health tech VC investment, about 1%, which is wild considering that it affects, as I said, half of the world population. But we see a lot of promising, companies appearing in the space, and they're already raising millions of dollars, so it's quite promising. And the main topics they're addressing are menstrual health and tracking, fertility solutions, maternal health, sexual health and wellness, menopause management, pelvic health, mental health, chronic disease management. Obviously, telehealth and remote monitoring have been fueled by COVID. There's an increased focus on health needs of diverse populations, including LGBTQ+ and other underserved groups. And there is growth in preventative care, which is quite interesting, and as well as emphasis on a more holistic care, which combines physical, mental, and emotional well-being. So overall, it's quite an exciting time that we're seeing, which, there are a lot of tech trends converging, and we can see people, for example, using their wearables to gain new data, and now they're feeling more educated, more empowered, having more insights into their health. And they are demanding better care, better support from their healthcare providers, from their insurance companies. And I know the topic often of your podcast is reproductive health and fertility. So in that space, we've seen it's still a tiny fraction of VC investment. It's only about 300 million a year. And often it's still labeled as female tech, which is probably not very correct, because we know that male factor often contributes and is as important and often overlooked when it comes to fertility.
Yeah, completely.
So in the last few years, we've seen an explosive growth of companies in the sector, which include like AI-powered period ovulation, fertility tracking tools like Natural Cycles, Mira, Floor. Tech-enabled fertility clinics, for example, a virtual fertility clinic, Apricity, which is a UK-based Series B company, or US unicorn Kindbody. There are some male fertility solutions in the market, which a bit still slow to the market, but appearing and solving things like sperm testing and freezing, at-home testing for both men and women, at-home fertility treatments, like, for example, UK company Bear Fertility, that are pioneering their intracervical insemination kit, and they just had their first baby born, so that's quite exciting. And fertility employee benefits companies, like UK-based Peppy or Fertifa. So that's a very interesting space as well, because we know that companies are quite used to providing private healthcare, including dental, mental health, but reproductive health hasn't been traditionally part of it, but things are changing.
Yeah, completely. I think there's definitely this shift towards a higher demand for these kind of solutions to be part of employee benefit schemes, just because it does affect so many people. And as you've kind of touched on there, there's so many different trends and markets and different ways in which this space is really innovating, which is really exciting. But there definitely seems to be a focus on this individualization of healthcare, and that is across the whole healthcare sector, as you said, not just FemTech, to label it as such. So I think that's really interesting to see people kind of taking a bit more power in their own healthcare and realizing that there are things they can do via wearables, education, at-home solutions online to actually really have a focus on their health. So I think that's definitely a really interesting key trend that kind of mirrors a lot of those different markets that we kind of see emerging. And you mentioned, I mean, itself in labeling the sector as femtech as being a challenge. Do you see what other challenges do you see these companies facing in particular that perhaps other companies or other parts of the market may not be facing?
Yes, that's a great question. And I think, yeah, despite seeing a lot of innovation happening and amazing entrepreneurs taking on great, solving, very important problems, I see two main challenges for these companies that are access to funding and integration with the traditional healthcare system. So in terms of access to funding, femtech and fertility are still, as I mentioned, considered a niche by many investors,
Mm,
even though it's affecting such a large number of people. For example, when it comes to fertility, according to WHO, it affects about 17.5% of the global adult population.
hmm
And we know that most of the femtech founders, about 70%, are women, whereas most investors, about 85%, are men who tend to invest in things that they can easily understand and relate to.
mm.
So, spoiler alert, that's not women's health in most
Yeah.
cases, unless they have a partner, a sister, daughter, someone who has come across any potential issues and really made them more aware and educated
Mm,
about the topic. So therefore, being a female founder raising for a femtech startup, it's kind of like a double challenge. So that's why I'm also doing what I'm doing to help them, support them with this fundraising journey, because they just need a bit more support, not because they're less performing. No, it's the opposite. They're often outperform their male counterparts, but it is because there are more barriers for them to overcome.
yeah.
Uh,
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but what kind of things do you advise them to do in these situations? Because it's impossible to say change overnight the investor board that you're going to be pitching to. So how do you kind of give them this advice?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. It's not something, as you said, that can be done overnight, but it is possible to kind of build your strategy around fundraising, also not to spend all your time and effort doing that because you want to be focusing on building your company, right? Not on fundraising. But I would say the main tips that I would recommend doing is like, first of all, like know your numbers. Because often, unfortunately, because they're women, they would have to maybe prove themselves more
Mm,
than it would be male founders. So know your numbers, build a strong financial plan, know your metrics, unit economics, and really aim to know how much you want to raise, not too much, not too little, so that you have approximately 18 to 24 months of runway. Because each fundraising takes so much time and effort, and that's the time you're spending not building your company.
yeah.
Then networking, so your network is your net worth. It is true. And building relationships with investors, mentors, partners can open many doors. And investors, especially in VC, they do tend to respond more to warm intros. And then I would say be persistent and don't be afraid to ask for money. I know it can be daunting to ask for money in a room full of men. I've been there, but be persistent and it will pay off. And also, explore other options. VC funding is not the only solution. There are many other things you can do and maybe a combination of several. Like you can bootstrap, so focus more on finding your first customers to fund your business rather than investors. Attract angels who are active in the space. Look into crowdfunding. We've seen some positive research showing that female-led campaigns outperform male-led campaigns in the UK in terms of funding reached. Bank loans, there are many schemes these days in the UK and other countries to support women entrepreneurship, government grants and support. For example, places like Innovate UK or EIC in Europe, they provide funding, mentorship, and resources to women-led startups. So yeah, there are options available, and of course, each option has its pros and cons, but it is worth spreading your resources and leveraging all your bets.
Oh no, that sounds great. Yeah, and thank you for taking that question. I think what was the and I'd love for you to expand on the other challenge that you saw FemTech companies facing as well in the space.
Yes, that's very important question. Thank you. So another problem I see for challenge for femtech startups is to really bridge the gap between their innovative technology-based solutions
Mm,
and traditional healthcare system, which is currently quite difficult. So when a person, for example, an individual has access to some data and insights coming from their wearables or exams or screenings or tests, they need to be able to share this information with their healthcare provider, their GP, and use that data,
mm,
to make decisions, to potentially anticipate and prevent more serious health conditions, which is currently not really working. And that's what we hear from a lot of companies is they have this amazing product and customers are happy, but when they come to their GP, there's nothing they can do with this data. So this is really something that needs a lot of work. And then because it's beneficial for everybody involved and it would save costs, time and effort, both for the individual and the healthcare system. So as a kind of consequence of this challenge and the access to funding,
mm.
um, unfortunately, we do see a lot of companies, despite a growth in number of new companies emerging, we see a lot of companies shutting down in the space because they can't get funding, they can't get enough traction or customers, and they're unfortunately forced to close, which is very
Yeah.
sad.
No, completely. So how would you advise people or a CEO or an entrepreneur in this space to attract more funding?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, really um, know your business, know your numbers, know how much you need
Yeah.
to raise.
Yeah.
Spread the resources across different options,
Mm,
know what's your USP, clearly like what's unique about your product, why is it a must have and not nice to have.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, try to be focused and persistent with your fundraising campaign so you don't spend too much time and effort on it because, yeah, as I said, it just takes away time
Mm-hmm.
from building your amazing
Yeah.
business.
Okay, that's really useful. I think so many people can, yeah, they're quite practical tips, which is really useful. And moving on to some of your other works, so with Freya's, could you tell me a little bit more about Freya's, how it raises awareness around reproductive health conditions or how it works, what you guys are doing, what your plans are, that kind of stuff?
Sure. Thank you for your question. So before I dive into that, I just wanted to make clear that since we've been talking about healthcare startups, Freya is not a startup, it's a non-for-profit company.
Mm-hmm.
So we believe that the lack of support around female reproductive health conditions stems not just from a lack of understanding of their pathology, but crucially from a lack of understanding of the true impact of these
Mm,
conditions. We work on the belief that if society as a whole understood what it is truly like to live with these conditions, then more support would be offered across the board, which is doctor's office, school, work, at
yeah.
home, from your partners, friends, families, co-workers, bosses. So what we do is we collect stories from all over the UK on several different platforms, like online roundtable, face-to-face workshops, interviews, to really amplify people's voices. And for the people we talk to, often they say that it might be the first time they've sat down with someone who's willing to listen to them and their experience
Wow.
without any judgment or questions about, have you tried XYZ
Mm,
solution? So we are really on a mission to change the way society talks, thinks, and feels about reproductive health, because we do know that 1 in 10 women in the UK have endometriosis, 1 in 10 have PCOS, two in three women will develop fibroids at some point in their lives, and 1 in 7 couples struggle with infertility. Yet the impact of these issues is often neglected. So people just keep hearing it's just a bad period or come back when you've tried for 2 years
mm,
and been unsuccessful. So really, besides the pure physical impact, which is quite significant, what we hear time and time again is people not feeling seen, heard, and supported by their surroundings. And so there is real gap that we're trying to address, and we do this by giving people voice to really tell
yeah.
their story. So currently we're a team of 5 directors and 11 active volunteers, and we have published 24 very personal stories with more undergoing editing at the moment. And very young organization. It was founded last year. So it's still, we're still, learning how to do things better. But we are so happy that we've already been able to reach so many people. And the impact of the stories is really kind of threefold. So first is for the person sharing the story. Often it's, the first time they really feel seen and heard. And it's a really therapeutic type of experience that helps them kind of tell their story and potentially make some peace with it, or make an impact, feel like they're making an impact with their story. And second part is really reaching someone else who might be going through the same thing. And really, if at least one person, we reach and they feel less alone, we feel like we've done something good. And then the third point is really educating everyone else and raising awareness about how it is for people to live with a reproductive health condition and how it affects their life and their experience. So yeah, that's
No, that's amazing. And I think it's definitely really important just to across all those different groups and to spread that awareness. And say if I were to wish to share my story with you guys, how does that process work? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we have trained volunteers who would, sit down with you and talk with you through your personal journey, and try to make you, really comfortable sharing, and only, of course, sharing only what you're comfortable to share at this point. And what we've even seen that, for example, one person has shared a story and that their friend was also encouraged to open up and share their personal story. So it is hopefully contagious in a good way, helping people, open up, because often what it feels like when you're going through those challenges is that you're all alone and isolated,
Definitely.
because a lot of topics are still quite taboo and people don't feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, for sure. And um I think that long form storytelling aspect of it is something that we don't always see nowadays. Everything seems to be a lot more like click through, quick fire. And I think it's quite nice to get that full body of story so people can see people's full journeys and also really relate to that on a deeper level than maybe just like an Instagram post or something like that.
Yes, and yeah, you can see on our websites, the stories that have been published,
Mm,
and it's, incredibly brave, inspiring women who have shared their stories.
mm-hmm.
And we as an organization believe that if more people were aware of the emotional and physical toll reproductive health conditions take on a person's whole life, all its aspects, then more support and empathy would be offered at school, at home, at work,
Yeah,
in the doctor's
completely.
office.
Yeah, I know some of my peers and friends both have some of these conditions and it can be really debilitating and it's really hard if you don't know what they're going through to really empathize and provide the right support. So I think that's really important if you get that full explanation of what this actually means and how this impacts their life. And kind of on that, looking to the future, what are some of the changes that you wish to see happening in this reproductive health awareness and support space? Where do you kind of see it going?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Well, even though a lot of progress has been achieved in recent years in the space, I would probably highlight one big topic that needs a lot of work, is really kind of education and normalizing taboo topics at school
Mm,
and workplace. So we need to educate women and men, at a younger age to know their bodies, their hormones,
mm-hmm.
uh, different issues that can potentially arise and their effects that can have on people's lives. So we know that, so many people are affected by it, but we still treat it as very isolated, niche problems. And we often tell people to only come to the doctor when something is wrong, but there are a lot of things that could be prevented or managed better if people recognize their symptoms or
Yeah.
uh, got some testing way in advance. But there is obviously, yeah, still a lot of education to be done, both for women and men, because often, surprisingly, even women don't know enough about their bodies until something is wrong. And this obviously normalizing also these taboo topics at workplace, which is something also we are trying to work on, but because we know that it affects, so much, we spend so much time at work, and there was a recent UK study that found that 2/3 of women, have had bad work experiences due to their periods. 90% of women suffer from cycle-related pain, and yet 95% of women don't have any, workplace resources to manage those issues effectively, because there's still a stigma associated with this. And of course, when it comes to fertility, it's even worse, because people are worried it's going to affect their career progression and prospects, and they can't share their challenges at work, which actually is quite sometimes difficult. And obviously, it is unlawful to fire someone because they're getting pregnant, but staggering 54,000 women a year lose their job because of getting pregnant, which is absolutely wild. So this is according to the Equality and Human Rights Commission report. Of course, employers should do better, and they should be more proactive, as reproductive health can have, significant impact on both your people and their business. And it can be also positive in the sense that you can attract people if you have reproductive health friendly policies. You can have a better, more empathetic and better work environment. So you have better retention and employee motivation. So there are a lot of benefits for employers to actually be quite open to these topics and embrace them. And that's why actually with Freja, we're launching a pilot with them and looking for a corporate to work with to try and use our approach of storytelling in the workplace, so that we're looking for, if there are any listeners interested in doing that. We are very keen on working with organizations who want to support their staff who live with reproductive health conditions through a power of storytelling to create more empathetic and supportive workplaces. So yeah, we'd be happy to chat to anyone who is interested. And the idea, we want to do it either as personal interviews or roundtables around reproductive health, again, to increase awareness, improve education and knowledge, and of course, provide safe space for people to feel supported and heard.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think, that's a really important and interesting way of looking at it, just to kind of foster that supportive environment whereby people actually feel comfortable in chatting to other people about the struggles that they're going through. Because as you mentioned, this is not just it's not just physically tough a lot of the time, it's also really emotionally and mentally tough. And to go through this in silence and to feel like you're isolated is obviously going to impact not just your own personal life, but also your ability to work productively, for example. So I think there's definitely the financial as well as the moral incentive to really, for workplaces to take ownership of this and to really support employees, just because that workplace is somewhere where you spend so much of the time of your day. So you want to create this as a safe and positive environment for your employees.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a lot of work being done, and we see positive progress, but there is a lot that needs to be done.
Yeah, no, there's so much. And I think, this is such an important topic. And a lot of the stuff that you guys are doing is really important. I really love the storytelling approach of it. But I think that kind of brings me to the end of my questions. And I just wanted to know, is there anything else that you wanted to say? I'll attach all of your socials down below so people can get in touch if they'd be interested. But yeah, it was super, super interesting conversation.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And yes, thank you for everyone listening. And of course, as I mentioned, if anyone, please feel free to reach out about any of the topics we talked about. We'd be happy to chat.
No, thank you so much for coming on.